Welcome back in Cowboys Nation to another and final episode of Doc Talk with Dr. Boothby with A to Z Sports and then OSMI Connecting. I'm excited to talk with Doc. It's been a while. Happy holidays to you and Happy New Year, I should say to
Happy
you,
New
Doc.
Year.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Hope everybody had a great New Year and got a chance to spend some time with family and celebrate and watch some football.
You know, the saying is New Year, new me, but it's been New Year, same thing for the Cowboys when it comes to these injuries. The list has been so long all year, Doc. We can just close our eyes, point, and pick a guy to talk about. But I really wanted to discuss one of the young up and coming players for the Cowboys and DeMarvion Overshown, who unfortunately suffered another ACL injury. This is now back-to-back years he suffered an ACL injury, but this time he tore the MCL and the PCL as well. And it's very disheartening because he was having a great year. But when you have an athlete on your table or that comes in that tears all the ligaments, MCL, PCL, and ACL, what goes into that recovery process, surgery process, and why would one have to have surgery on both knees like DeMarvion Overshown did?
Sure. No, it's a great question, and unfortunately, you're right. It increases the complexity level of the surgical repair, as well as some of the rehab repair. It's just we have four main stabilizing ligaments that surround our knee. The only one that he didn't get there of those four was the lateral collateral or LCL, but MCL, ACL, PCL, and the main two there, the ACL and the PCL, they basically take the knee joint, which is a hinge joint. And if we looked at the knee from the side, the ACL and PCL prevent the lower part of the leg from sliding forward and from sliding backwards.
Hmm.
So we want that joint to work as a hinge joint back and forth, but we don't want it to slide forward and slide backwards. The MCL's job, if we looked from the front, is to prevent it from pivoting this way. So, when we start talking about ligamentous injury and it's multiple ligaments, that changes the equation into what we call a multi-lig knee, a multi-ligamentous injury. And it requires, unfortunately, more surgery. So either any of those three ligaments would require surgical intervention, and we're basically lobbing it all into one. And so you can imagine the amount of swelling, the amount of surgical time, the amount of scar tissue formation, the amount of ligamentous balancing that has to go into effect in terms of putting them in the right spots. Just it really increases the complexity level. And makes it more challenging, obviously, for the surgeon as well as the player, as well as the rehab, people. It's a harder deal.
Yeah, the rehab part is kind of the next question I wanted to ask you about. There was fortunately there wasn't any nerve damage. That was something that was people were scared about, where Demo maybe suffered nerve damage. So the reports were that hey, he may be able to return mid to late season. And I know with modern medicine, the ACL injuries aren't a killer as they used to be. But when you tear all three, and you said the surgery is a bit more extensive and the rehab is a bit more extensive, are you looking at a situation where this could be an entire season that he'll need to recover?
Yeah, potentially. I think it's just you raise a good point. I think the variability goes up, right? So if you get one or one of these ligaments specifically, I think you can start to target the timing a little bit better. You can start to be more specific about, okay, this should take X to Y in terms of length of recovery. But when you start adding in the complexity, when you start adding in the different ligaments, there's just more variability, and the patient could progress kind of right online and hopefully be back sooner, but there could also be a pivot or a slowdown where they're starting to have more of an issue with part of the rehab. So I think it's just harder to predict.
Okay.
You mentioned that he had surgery on the other knee as well, and this is not really uncommon with multi-lig injuries, because you have to get these new ligaments from somewhere, right? Like, we just don't come with extra parts. And so sometimes we have to go to the other knee in order to harvest some of these ligaments or parts of some of these ligaments that we need, and then use them, obviously in the injured knee. So that also slows down the recovery just a little bit, because we've had to rob Peter to pay Paul,
Right.
and there's more, more rehab to be done there as well. So, again, I think it increases the complexity, which increases the variability in the time frame for return.
Another young core player who hit IR, which the Cowboys had a lot of these players hit IR towards the end of the season. CeeDee Lamb was dealt AC joint sprain back in Week 9 against the Falcons, but didn't miss a game. He played through it, but Doc, he every time he fell, he was getting up wincing. He was holding it. But he fought through it. And talking to some former athletes, they talk about hey, they can get shot up and they can kind of fight through these things because of the medicine, but at some point it'll catch up to them, and it did. They apparently it didn't progress, which I don't know how it would be able to progress if you keep falling on it. And they shut CeeDee Lamb down. So how bad does an AC joint sprain have to be for you to shut it down at some point?
Sure. No, it's a good point, and I'm glad they basically treated it as they did. The AC joint again is the clavicle. That's the C part of the AC joint, and then the acromion, which is in the front portion of the shoulder here. So where the clavicle and the acromion meet is the AC joint, and there's a group of several ligaments that holds that joint together. And typically when you fall directly onto the shoulder, there can be energy that causes the clavicle to typically pop up in that joint, and it tears initially one and then two and then potentially three of those ligament groups. And so the severity of the AC joint sprain is really how many of the ligament groups are involved. Now, the good news here is you really can't screw it up too much, right? Like it's a pain issue. And so the reason they tried to bring him back, so quickly was he was able to tolerate, at least initially, that pain, and there wasn't really a big risk of doing some damage that was going to be long standing to him. The problem was that you hit it on the head. When you continue to fall and when you continue to land directly on that shoulder, and the ligament has already been compromised, well, it's a matter of time before sometimes those
Right.
ligaments get injured further, and you're just not able to be effective. And at some point, an injured CeeDee Lamb, however talented and amazing he is, becomes less effective than who's filling his spot. And it's just one of those things where you've got to shut him down and let it heal. But these are the challenges that we face when we're trying to keep guys in the game mid-season injuries. Obviously a lot harder than if it was in the off season and we could give them appropriate rest.
Well, good thing is they said no surgery would be needed at this time. When I hear at this time, that kind of feels like they're leaving the door open. So hopefully rest fixes this, and we don't get a notification. Hey, CeeDee Lamb, breaking news, gets surgery on his shoulder. But I do love to hear, hey, no surgery is needed.
Absolutely, and by far the majority of these sort of injuries, these AC joint sprains, do heal on their own.
Okay.
Obviously, that's it. That's a guess. It's an educated guess, but over time, if it were not progress and he was to still have discomfort or instability there, you could obviously fix it if you had to. But I think that by far the majority of this time, a little bit of rest and letting him heal up should do the trick.
All right, there you have it. Hey, Doc, if there's anybody that's having issues with the shoulder, the PCL, MCL, LC, any L, where can they go to find you?
Find us. We'd love to help you out. We have 3 locations in Fort Worth, in Mansfield, and up in Decatur. And we'd love to help you out. You can find us on the web at osmifw.com, or you can call our office at 817-529-1900.
There you have it, Doc. Appreciate you. And then once again, happy holidays, happy new year to you and the family. And hopefully it's an even better one for you and everyone out there.
There you go. Happy holidays to everybody. Hope it's a great 2025.
Indeed.